Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Kamwangi AA Wash Process Kenya from MAME Coffee. And there's the container right there. And MAME, based out of Zurich, Switzerland. And they were a suggestion to us by Oh Boy, Oh Boy, Oh Boy. So shout outs to and thank you to Oh Boy, Oh Boy, Oh Boy for the suggestion. This is their first ever appearance on this channel, and the first ever appearance for any Swiss-based coffee roaster, as we had zero familiarity with them going into this review. They are a coffee roaster I have seen carried by multiple European subscription services, as well as multi-roasters, so it was just a matter of time before we got an opportunity to review their coffee. Looking forward to discussing them here today, as this right here is day 37. And recipe that we went with for this coffee was our standard recipe, a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 96 degrees Celsius, about 205 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the Chemex, which indicates a more medium grind. Roast profile for this coffee definitely skews on the more moderately light side of things, as it's not quite as light as some of the European Nordic-based coffee roasters that we have reviewed. However, it definitely still skews on the more light side of things, as most people would consider this to be lighter by most standards and metrics. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 15, first impression, and the cup definitely came out bright and tart in a slightly more citric direction. It did give off great Kenyan candied sweetness right in the cup, right from the onset, but it does seem to focus a little bit more on the bitter citric aspect side of things. There was sweetness in significant abundance, and that definitely left a positive first impression. Day 18, ran it through the V60, and this came out a little bit more traditional Kenyan-like, as it had a lot more of the bright berry side of things with a slight savory aspect. There was a much more long-lasting finish that did skew on those tart berries, so as a result, not quite as pleasant on that second day. Day 20, ran it through the April dripper, and this was a better day in terms of complexity to the cup, as there was a slightly sweeter side of things that was on the back end of this bright citric component. There were a little bit more of these floral aspects present in the cup as well, and I do believe that they have a floral note listed on here. They do, it's jasmine. And in addition to that, there were plenty of those tart candied aspects yet again in this cup, so the April brewer did give it a little bit more depth and complexity. We continue on to day 23, first asterisk, as I was sick on this day of taking notes. Back to the Chemex, and the sweetness is back to its candied bitter citric sense yet again, with plenty of that brightness. Slightly complementary to the floral aspects, but it is skewing very far on the bright and bitter lemon citric side of things. Day 26, another asterisk, and this time ran it through the V60, and I really seemed to settle on the Chemex with this day, as the Chemex was much more enjoyable. This one did give out so many of those, well, cherry and tomato-like characteristics, so not necessarily enjoying it on this day, as there was an additional bit of smokiness present within the cup. High on the lemon and citrus as well, with so much of that brightness. A lot of this is in line with expectations for Kenyan coffees, but the Chemex really did seem to kind of accentuate a lot more of the sweet characteristics while diluting a little bit more of those savory aspects. Day 28, the cup is the best it's been to this point by a distance, as there are so many of those candied side of things. This time I would say the lemon even felt a little bit more candied, and the rest of the cup continues to remain bright and strong in terms of the Kenyan acidity, but the sweetness is almost near equal levels, and as a result it balanced that out, and that made it my favorite coffee to that day. Day 31, the cup continues to remain pretty good, if slightly unspectacular, as there's plenty of that candied citric brightness to the cup. It does continue to remain on the more lemon side of things. That was the most pronounced characteristic for MAME, start to finish. Slightly better in that sense with a complementary tart berry as well. So a lot of the traditional Kenyan characteristics you might expect, but a lot more in the candied direction. Day 33, the cup continues to track along those same lines, as there's nice sweetness and clarity, even if it isn't reaching the heights I would hope for a Kenyan coffee. That's something we'll discuss a little bit in the tasting wheel. Very Kenyan-esque in the savory sense. Citrus, tart berries, a lot of the expectations you would have for a Kenyan coffee, but again, I'm really focusing and highlighting the more candied side of things. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And 4 level 4s, so let's go through those real quick. The finish level 4, as I would say when it comes to Kenyan coffees, I would be stunned if they never reach minimum level 4. This one right here definitely had a lot of those lasting bright citric aspects to it, so that definitely justifies that being there at that level 4 mark. Acidity, level 4. I've been mentioning that right from the start of this coffee, that the first thing you notice is the brightness, definitely in line with the expectations for that Kenyan acidity. Very bright, very prominent, and consistent throughout the time drinking it. Berry fruit, level 4. I will say that the tart berries were in equal measure to a lot of the citric aspects I got. Citric aspects are on the forefront. The kind of tart candied berry sweetness is a little bit more on the subtle side of things when compared to the citrus. So for that reason, you could say that the citrus may be on the slightly higher side, maybe a true level 4. Berry may be on the lower side of that level 4. But even then, it was quite prominent, pronounced enough for me to justify it being there at that level 4 mark. So berry fruit level 4, citrus fruit, I don't think I need to touch on that too much. I've said throughout the entirety that it was that lemon characteristic that was the most pronounced for me, so I definitely see that being there at that level 4 mark. Now we have a bunch of level 3s, so we will start with the florality. Level 3, yes, that was the most pronounced through the April dripper, and even then, a lot of the time I was drinking this coffee, it felt more subtle when compared to a lot more of the in-your-face, bright citric components. So that's why it did remain at that level 3 mark. Caramel, level 3. And that's one thing I really wanted to highlight was the candied aspect of this coffee. So I forgot which roaster that they use, but I definitely felt like it wasn't something like the Loring, because that doesn't really seem to accentuate a lot of these candied Kenyan characteristics. This one did a great job of doing so. So for that reason, definitely on the level 3 side of this tasting wheel. Bitterness, level 3. That's 100% attributed to the citric components in this coffee, as it's very much a citric bitterness that's present within here. So I definitely see that being there at that level 3 mark. Savoriness, level 3. Being completely honest, that's a little high, especially if I was brewing this to the Chemex, especially if I made this tasting wheel with the Chemex, because it's not really that savory. It's not overly tomato-like. If anything, I'd bump that down to a level 2, especially today. I feel like this might be the best day of the coffee I've experienced, as it seems to continue to trend in the right direction. So the best of this coffee might still be yet to come. And then the two most important things we must discuss, the cleanliness at a level 3, and if I was being really generous, I could bump this all the way up to a level 4. I usually reserve that for the Kenyan coffees that seem to lack a ton of the savory aspects, and this one right here doesn't have too much of it, so I think I could probably justify that level 4. But for the majority of the time I was drinking this coffee, especially for the V60, it does get that level 3 for me. Sweetness. I've been hinting at and highlighting the sweetness right from the start of this coffee as well, and it's sweeter than the average Kenyan coffee is for me, so for that reason it is definitely on the higher side of level 3, but I really had to think if it reached the same level of sweetness as some of our favorite Kenyan coffees that we've reviewed on this channel, and I couldn't quite put it there. If I did, it would be on the lower side of level 4, but there is great sweetness, and that's why I wanted to highlight that in the caramel side of things, because it's a candied sweetness. So it's really close, and I think that would have been the thing to set this coffee over the top if I could have got both of those marks at a level 4, the cleanliness and the sweetness. But even then, I don't want to undersell how much I enjoyed this coffee, because I think those things were really, really close, and that kind of set it apart from being one of my favorite Kenyan coffees ever to a Kenyan coffee that I really did enjoy. I think for the most part, that looks about what I got from this tasting wheel. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee, it actually was one of the more enjoyable Kenyan coffees that we have reviewed on the channel. I do want to give MAME some big credit for this one, because I was really impressed by the candied sweetness that was present within this cup. Significantly less of the savory aspects, even if there was such a stark contrast between the two brew methods. If I'm able to pick it out and get it correct with one brew method, then that's fine by me, whichever brew method that is. If I can get more sweet side of things and significantly less of the savory side of things, even if it means a fair bit of brightness, and that's still enough of a selling point to me. I think the other kind of detracting factor that might have held this one back was that it did focus a lot more on the citrus side of things, and that typically isn't what I go for when I do enjoy my Kenyan coffees. I want them to be a lot more of those dark berry, those dark candy sort of aspects to them. So it's really pretty in that sense what this coffee is going for, but even then it's not the type of Kenyan that I typically would like, just a couple things here and there, and it could have been in the same category as some of the other ones I've raved about pretty strong. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, there are a lot of people that I can suggest this, and I think this one does skew a little bit more on the traditional Kenyan side of drinkers, because this one does have a great bit of brightness to it. So I know that's the reason a lot of people really enjoy these Kenyan coffees. It has above average sweetness for me, and in addition to that, it does have plenty of those kind of tart berries that you might expect from the cup, but in addition to that, some wonderful citric components to it. As mentioned, towards the end, the citrus was a little bit more on the candied, sweeter side of things, so it was even kind of turning me around and getting me to enjoy it a little bit more than I had right from the start. Still has a fair bit of that body. I know the body was charting kind of low on this. That was attributed to the Chemex, so many of those Kenyan characteristics that you would like, with maybe a little less of those savory aspects. I think for the most part, I'll leave this review at that. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee or anything from MAME, would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it, or them as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Kamwangi AA Wash Process Kenya from MAME Coffee. Thank you for watching.